Well, thanks guys for
That's all.
joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, so I was just jamming to your latest album, well, the singles that you've been releasing from the album, and I love that it's like a mixture of 80s metal kind of with 90s grunge. It's a cool sound.
Yeah, we grew up in a crossroads of you know, listen. Obviously, I have a Nirvana shirt on. I just saw that on the screen, but grew up during grunge, and then playing guitar pushed me closer to metal. And I think Travis, it's just in the same age group. Both those things kind of existed at the same time, and it's just tough to break apart and separate them when
Yeah,
writing.
and no, I love the guitar riffs on the songs. How easily do guitar riffs come to you?
I was talking about this with Travis actually the other day because we just wrote a new song, and it took me like 10 minutes to write the entire tune.
Wow.
And some songs I can toil over for hours, and they suck by the time I'm done with them. So it depends.
Oh wow. No, I love it. I'm a
Yeah,
sucker
I'd
for
say
guitar
vocals
riffs.
are exactly the same. Some things, it's just you start coming out with an idea and it just like pours out, and then another one you just mess with it forever and you're never quite happy with it. So I don't know. It's really interesting writing. The one that he's talking about right now, I also probably wrote at least as fast as anything I've ever written before. I got to change a few words and lines around, but basically all the ideas are already there. And that's kind of cool when something comes together that fast. And honestly, I think it's going to be one of our best tunes once it's done as well, which
Oh,
is
that's
very
awesome.
cool.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I love the music videos you guys have made. How much fun are those for you guys to kind of get creative with the videos?
Well,
Still
from
able
a
to hear
creative
Travis?
standpoint, we've been working a lot with the studios, and so we kind of go back and forth with them a little bit on the basic ideas. And then once that's done, they pretty much give us an edit. And then we just kind of make our little picky notes and argue amongst ourselves about what notes we should give and what notes we shouldn't. And then eventually you just put it out there. But we've been very happy. The last two we've done were with Red 13 Studios and Revelry Studios, and they were both awesome to work with.
Oh, that's cool. And I know you guys have some new members in the group. How has it been creating new music with the new members?
That's kind of been just a process we're just starting because when we get the new members, our initial thought is, especially with COVID, things loosening up, shows coming up, we wanted to be able to play shows. And in order to do that, they needed to catch up on the material that people already know. So we were trying to do that, and then we just had some shows get postponed due to a tour that didn't want to run into COVID issues coming into winter. So we decided, well, now's a good time to probably start writing music together. And everybody has a different process, past band members, new band members, on how they want to do it. But Travis and I are the ones who've been in the band the longest and know the recipe for success that's worked for us, both outside, her starting, and then all the way into the studio. So we're trying to navigate the waters of how to get everybody in the band to kind of assimilate to our way of doing things without completely boxing out the other members on how they create best.
Yeah, and you guys being from Boston, you know that the live music scene is just starting to return, which is exciting. But I don't know if you've noticed, like quite a few of the venues, the smaller venues in the Boston area, have kind of closed down. So hopefully it'll bounce back, and these smaller venues will get the influx of people that they need. Do you guys have like a favorite music venue
Honestly,
around here?
oh, that's a great question. Playing the Hampton Beach Casino Ballroom, we've done it
Yeah.
a couple times, has probably been my favorite. It's such an old venue. The acoustics there are ridiculous. Last time we played was with 3 Days Grace, and we got a full sound check basically. And I remember walking around the empty venue and singing and stuff, and it's just like Jesus, like everywhere in the place just sounds awesome. you know, and it's a big stage. It's just nice. And both times we played there, the crowds were amazing too. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, you guys have played with a lot of cool bands. So, I mean, that must be really exciting to get to share the stage with, you know, lots of legendary acts.
Yeah, we've definitely gotten to share the stage with some bucket list bands. There's still some more that would be very cool to play with. I mean, there's honestly probably hundreds that would be great to play with,
Yeah.
but you know, to be able to like say that we just were direct support for like Megadeth is crazy. They're definitely one of my top 3 probably bands of all time. Yeah, it's been pretty awesome the last few years watching the growth of things. And then honestly, COVID just cut our legs out almost completely. But we've really been riding the ship the last, well, especially since the new members came on, but even over the last, whatever it's been, 9-10 months since we recorded the rest of the album. And now writing new material, I'm probably more excited than ever because I feel like, especially with me and Josh doing this together for so long now, like he said earlier, we've reached a place where we just figure out what's working so fast. And we're never, as a group, as tight and quick with our writing as we are now, where we pretty much sit in a room and we're working parts out. We're like, okay, this part's great. This one needs a little something. And then it just kind of comes together.
And well, the album, which is behind you, The Silence of Ecstasy, The Agony of Dreams. So that's available at Bull Moose, right?
Yeah, you can get it through Bull Moose Music, or you could just send us a message directly. We really should get on it with a little more distribution. It's been kind of a lot of side talks, but again, between new members, COVID, new kids, our bass player just had a baby. My wife had a baby 6 months ago. It's been kind of just a lot of life stuff going on. Our drummer's got another one on the way. So there's like a lot of stuff going on with kids and family and everything. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I kind of wanted to kind of go back to your influences. Are there specific classic rock albums that you find you can always go back to and they never get boring or you never get sick of them?
Travis, you go first.
I'll let Josh go first.
You want me to go first?
Oh.
Yeah.
Sure.
There's definitely for me, and it's still probably my favorite album of all time. And I think a lot of things that I don't get sick of are nostalgia based. So I can't parse it and separate what is really something I would get tired of and what's good and what's not, just based off what I liked when I was a kid that I still like. So like Soundgarden Super Unknown is my favorite album of all time. And I can't tell anybody that why it's better than any other album. It just, for me, it's every song is so much different, and it's kind of like what we're trying to achieve as a band is that we want everything to be different but still sound like us. And that's what I like about Soundgarden and a lot of their albums is every song is drastically different from each other, but at the same time it still sounds like the same band. And it's interesting throughout. But this is kind of going slightly off topic, but for me, it's not necessarily styles that I like, because there's people that are like, I like thrash metal, and I like thrash metal only. For me, I like every genre, but only a few bands within each one. I like good songwriting. Whoever's the great songwriters, I don't care what the style is, as long as that is the main part of it. That's what I like. So I listen to everything for the most part. As long as the songwriting is good, that's what I like.
That makes sense. Yeah. What about you, Travis?
Josh pretty much nailed it as far as the general things that I think keep drawing me back to the same albums. I'm certainly less of a picky listener probably as Josh is in a lot of ways. I probably like a much broader variety of bands. But I just keep going back to the same kind of stuff over and over too. I would say that among my big favorites that I listen to pretty much still constantly, I've always loved talking about Megadeth, the Countdown to Extinction album. that one was pretty like on the edge at that time, production wise and stuff. They were so meticulous about the way they recorded it. The lyrics are so good. The production, just kind of everything on that album they were just taking off at that time. It was pretty awesome. Right, literally within weeks of that, Angel Dust, Faith No More. It's a huge one for me. That's a super layered album. Just so much going on. You could put headphones on now and probably hear little tones and sounds and samples and things in there that maybe you didn't hear, even if you've heard the song 100 times before. Big fan of a lot of early Incubus albums. Yeah, man, I could probably go on all day about music, and a lot of it actually tends to be in the 90s and stuff. But I think, again, that just tends to be like where we grew up. And also, you know, when you go back and talk about 80s stuff, that's all, it's kind of hand-me-down. So if you're growing up in the 90s, you're listening, you know, maybe your sister listen to something, maybe Skid Row or something, and then it's like, oh, okay, and you absorb some of that too. But you know, there's some modern stuff that I like as well. But I think that I probably always go back on that nostalgia thing and keep going back to those same records.
No, it seems like right now the nostalgia thing is currently centered around the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
At least I feel like whenever I walk around Boston, I see like college kids, you know, wearing clothing that was popular in the 90s. And it seems like 90s music is becoming popular again. A lot of these 90s bands are going on tour. So it seems like everyone's nostalgic for the 90s right now.
It's amazing how things come back around. It was very secular. Like I remember in the 90s how so much of the 90s was people being nostalgic about the 70s.
Yeah.
And then if you look back just, you know, 5-10 years ago, how many TV shows brought back 80s nostalgia, and like Stranger Things.
Right. Yeah.
People watch that show and like it's a great show, but at the same time, the soundtrack putting you in that place of the 80s again for a lot of people, even though I didn't necessarily, I was born in 84, so I remember parts of the 80s, but the early 90s, watching movies and shows from the 80s that are still, you know, popular, made me feel like I still kind of grew up in the 80s a bit. And then hearing those soundtracks, and then the TV show The Goldbergs. Yeah. It's just like they bring back little things about the 80s, and you're like, that's just, you know, it kind of reminds me of my childhood, my very young childhood. And that's that nostalgia, you know. So it comes back like every 20 to 30 years, your decade's coming back, it seems. You know?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because in the 90s, they had Freaks and Geeks with the 70s, that 70s show with the 70s.
Show,
yeah.
Days and Confused.
Right,
yeah. So I guess, every 25 years.
Yeah, if you look at the 70s, they did Happy Days in the 70s or the 50s.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point that you made.
Yeah, now that 90s show is going to be coming on pretty soon, which I'm actually pretty curious about. It's literally, the show is going to be taking place a few years before that 70s show actually started, I think in like 98 or something. So now I think that they said the new show is going to take place in like 95, which is kind of crazy. Like that time goes by that fast for one, but also that, you know, now people are having the same nostalgia for the time period that show actually came on, when it was lampooning a little bit of something else and bringing on nostalgia from something else. So I'd say nostalgia is a big part of my life in a lot of ways. So
no, same here. I also find maybe starting in the 90s, maybe that's when mainstream music kind of declined, kind of going back to lyricism. I feel like the quality of lyrics, I don't know, starting in the 90s with mainstream music, at least, that's when it kind of declined. And I don't know, maybe people are kind of missing the authenticity and the quality musicianship from music.
I think that's something that Josh particularly has talked about a lot. I think if you dig deep enough, you can always find really talented people.
There's definitely talented people out there, but I just mean like in terms of what the top 40 plays.
Yeah.
Sure. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's things now, I mean, have gotten so dumbed down at times where it's crazy. I mean,
it's like, how do we go from Stairway to Heaven to WAP? It's like we kind of went backwards in terms of music.
Yeah, I think, at least if you went through, there was bubblegum pop all the way back to the 50s and you go through, but at least it was, there was a balance struck between the honest, lyricist who took his time and really meant what he was, and the person who was just looking for that, that quick hit, meaningless, and not that some of those songs I don't enjoy, but now it seems like you're saying it's tipped all the way in the opposite direction, where you just have that. You're not going to get much meaning out of this song, no matter how much you dig, and that's a lot of that. But like Travis said, this is an era where you have to actually dig more to find bands that are, in that. Like a newer band that I love that I put on the same level as so many of the bands I grew up and I loved was a band like Mastodon, where musically, lyrically are just phenomenal in every way, and they're not, I wouldn't say mainstream, but they're more popular than
we are
than many other bands that you have to kind of dig to find. Well, we are, yeah.
Are they from Sweden?
They're from the South.
Oh, okay. I might be thinking of a different band.
Are you thinking of Opeth, maybe?
Maybe, yeah.
Probably Opeth, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think both of you guys bring up good points on that stuff. And Josh actually just made me think of the fact that, even if you go back in the 50s and stuff, they had songs like Lollipop, which is like maybe one of the worst songs ever, that Lollipop. I mean, like, oh my God. But then they also had, pretty soon the Beatles were coming along, and they had a lot of cool stuff going on too. I think the other thing though is the market has become so small now, because there's no money to be made for most newer artists in music. So the only stuff that's able to get through is the stuff that's going to be a mega hit that anybody from the age of 5 to 55 could, immediately get stuck in their head. So, it's the Lollipops of the world that are going to get through, because there's no room for a super unknown type of album in most people's lives. One, they don't want to take the time to listen to anything that long to gravitate to it. And two, I think that the record companies and the media are probably afraid to put the money and resources behind something that they're not 100% sure is going to attract a large audience.
Yeah, I think they just become more disposable, put something out there, make it a hit, move on to the next one.
Definitely. Probably if you went back even 10 years ago and looked at the charts, you'll see that either a lot of the people that were charting are either legacy artists that were famous in the 80s or 90s, or they're going to be people that you've forgotten since then, and they had like one thing and then they just disappeared. There's not a whole lot of new, and that's actually scary. Like in rock music, you see a lot of fans complain and they'll say, there's nothing new being done. There's nothing good anymore. One, that's based on a lot of nostalgia. And two, they don't have an outlet like MTV that's putting something in their face. You're not going to see Black Hole Sun, in rotation 10 times a day on a channel anymore. And even if there was, you have 1,000 opportunities to watch other things anyway. So I'm actually worried about what the state of rock in particular, and metal, is going to be in another 10 or 15 years. Once you've got some of these bands like Metallica, those guys are pushing 60. Who's going to be the one that takes over playing these stadiums and stuff? And I know there's only one Metallica, but I think we've got a real crisis of no real stars being pushed. There are very few bands. There's Ghost that's come through in the last few years. Obviously, Mastodon's blown up over the last decade or so. But there are not a lot of bands that are selling a lot of tickets. And I think the more that happens, it's almost like a poisoned well. And you're going to end up with even less that do it. And people are going to be even more afraid to push in other artists or anybody that could be groundbreaking or interesting, or even maybe doing something we're kind of familiar with, but doing it in their own way. And it's just going to be left to the pop artists, and that's going to be it.
Yeah, so it's really left down to social media to kind of market yourself, and until I guess radio or record executives try to push rock music again.
I think that maybe a lot of the days too, though, of people like, as far as actual talent, you know, when we talk about that, probably, you know, you could go on YouTube and find incredible guitar players and stuff, or singers or whatever, that can, you know, some guy that can sound exactly like Freddie Mercury or whatever, but are they writing that music? And I think that's where, with Mammothor, one of our strengths is probably, and progressively so, been in our writing. I feel like it's gotten better and better. And if you honestly listen to this new album, you can break down the lyrics, you can break down the structures and stuff. It's not the most challenging stuff ever, but it's pretty solid, like through and through. Their hooks and all that, you know. And I'm hoping that more people keep discovering us based on the quality that we're trying out. You know, it's not just based around like, can you do this? Like, probably there's, you know, thousands and thousands of people that can sing something better than I can, but like, I feel like all quality of it is very strong. So I'm super into this album that you see behind me. So.
No, yeah, I love that your lyrics kind of cover different topics that are very relevant and kind of personal too.
I think we kind of go all over the map with that stuff. There's things, if you take a song like Trial by Fire, I mean, for me, it's a pretty personal song. But then you could take something like Bury the Motive, which came pretty much straight from that one, is about school shootings. But then there's also ones like Hitcher, which is based partially in a true story of when I tried to help a guy that I watched get hit by a car.
Oh, wow.
And then I kind of took that idea. Yeah, he passed away. It wasn't good. But I took that story and actually turned it into something like kind of a little
morbid,
more kind of, yeah, morbid, funny, edgy, like however you want to call it, a little black humor, because I made it, I basically asked myself, because the guy that ran the guy over, he never saw him. I think he got distracted a little bit. And the guy was way outside the crosswalk. I think he was drunk or on drugs or something. I was literally looking at my wife and I was like, geez, I wonder how many more people are going to have to get hit by cars before people start, you know, using the crosswalk or pay attention to the signs. I look back and this guy just gets hit and takes off like a pinwheel. But I thought to myself, well, what if that guy had done it on purpose? You know? So I wrote the song Hitcher, which is basically this guy that's just, his sole purpose in life is basically like, what they call like pedestrian bowling. He's just trying to run people down. So yeah, we kind of run the gamut between serious stuff, kind of a little bit funny, black humor, you know, and I think that that's definitely something that we can pride ourselves on, is that we have at least some interesting content if you want to dig into it.
Oh, absolutely. I like that.
There's no lollipops.
Sure. Before we wrap up, I wanted to kind of go back to live music and ask you, as a fan, what has been the most memorable concert you've ever attended?
I'm not going to just give you one because it's impossible. But Roger Waters, when he came back around with The Wall, I saw it in 2010, and I saw it again in 2012 where we changed a couple of things, and I saw it at Fenway Park in 2012. And the second time around, I brought my wife with me. And the experience for myself was great, just like it was the first time. But how much she enjoyed it and how emotional she got watching that show made that show probably one of the best shows that I ever had. Like, sharing the experience that she was having at the same time, with how, you know, the emotion that show can actually bring out of you. And if we go back kind of nostalgia wise, seeing all those 90s bands like come back and just being able to see Soundgarden, Stone Temple Pilots, and being able to see Alice in Chains live has been cool. And I was a very big Pantera fan, obviously, you know, throughout their whole time, and being able to see them pretty much 6 months apart with some of my other favorite bands of all time. I saw Pantera, Slayer, and Soulfly the first time around, and the second time around was Pantera, Slayer, Morbid Angel. And Morbid Angel is my favorite death metal band of all time. And just as a kid being like, oh, these bands are playing at the same time, and I could see that show. It was really cool.
And then we got to open for Soulfly.
Yeah.
Oh, you did? Oh, that's
pretty cool too.
That's awesome.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a pretty loaded question. I'm a little bit with Josh on that. So many shows have blown me away, and I mean, like even seeing Guns N' Roses a few years ago at Gillette Stadium was
Great show.
pretty awesome. And I was actually excited. Like, I'm one of those people. I'll usually be like a defender. It's weird, you know. We were talking about like a lot of these bands and quality of things and how it goes down. And like, if I was thinking about the other day how people like Nickelback went from being this band that apparently everybody loved, which I was never that into, and then all of a sudden everybody acts like they're the worst thing ever. And I thought how disingenuous that all is. And, you know, now I find myself almost being a defender of them. I'm like, well, they got a couple of songs that aren't that bad. Well, I did the same thing a little bit with GNR, like, you know, Chinese Democracy, which is obviously more of just an Axl type of thing, but there's a few really good songs on there. So I was excited when I saw them, and they actually had the guts to play those songs. And that's something that I've always liked and respected with a lot of bigger bands that do that. Metallica is really good about that too. Like, they don't just cater to playing like, here's the hits. Well, that album didn't do as well, so forget that album. Like, no, it's like that's part of their legacy. And I try to push that with Mammothor a little bit too. Like, you know, I feel like especially whenever new members come in, everybody's kind of like, let's work on new stuff. Let's just play the new stuff. And I agree that that should be, you know, 80% of the focus. But, you know, even before I joined as the singer, I'm happy to play, you know, and do the stuff that the other guy did, because it's something that some people like. And, so anyway, I've just always really respected that. As far as just an actual like customer to a show, I got to say probably a few years ago, seeing Faith No More the first time, because I was front row and center with my hands on the stage at is it the Orpheum? Oh, it's a smaller venue in Boston.
The Pavilion.
It was one before that. They played it at small. I want to say it's Orpheum. I saw that show too. But that one I was a little further back. But I've spent like a week's pay, front row and center, hands on the stage. That's when they had all the flowers out and everything. Mike Patton spit all over me. It was awesome. Yeah, that was very cool. I have videos of that, of me like singing all the songs, and my wife recording me, recording him, and back and forth, like three from each other. That was pretty amazing. So, but God, so many countless great experiences. I mean, Megadeth alone, back quite a few years back now, I lived in Australia and I was going through some trouble. I mean, that's how I had gotten to meet them, is through being a big fan. I had become friendly with their guy that ran their website. He got me backstage passes after their show. I went to see them in Sydney, Australia, and then met with the band, and basically had Dave and everybody pulled me aside and talked about what was going on in my life. We checked in with each other. Next thing I know, I moved back to the United States. I'm in Maine, and I run into their bass player outside, and then their guitar player. They gave me more backstage passes. Then I'm back hanging out with the band again. You know, a couple of years later, I'm like doing roadie work for them at the ballroom. 10 years to the day later, almost to the day later, we're opening for them. So it's
wow.
like, I mean, to pinpoint like one experience is crazy, because like some of these, it's like things are all linked. So I guess the experiences where big things happen that I didn't anticipate were probably definitely my favorite memories, because it was like personal stuff. But like, just as far as shows and stuff, I was very impressed that Guns N' Roses did as well as they did for like 3+ hours. Like, that's a lot.
That's a long show.
Yeah. That's a lot, especially for that kind of vocal style and everything. And everybody can talk as much trash as they wanted about Axl, but that night he sounded good. And that is a hard way to sing at any age, especially for that period of time.
Oh gosh, yeah. I can't imagine Vince Neil doing that for 3 hours.
I can see Vince Neil doing it for 3 minutes. Travis, what was
he fell off the sage the other night.
Oh, did he? Oh, it's terrible.
He
broke his
ribs. Throw in the towel.
What was Dave Mustaine's comment to you about when you opened up for him? Was this a rags to riches story or something like that? Did he have a comment like that? When we found out you were opening
when we opened up?
Yeah. Did he say something to the roadie?
I talk about a rags to riches story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yep.
Well, guys, I really appreciate your time chatting.
Thank you very much, Jen.
And can't wait to see you guys on the road one of these days.
That'd be great.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, guys. Enjoy the rest of
Yeah,
your
hopefully
day.
we'll see you soon.